Hello, Keith.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm sorry that I've not been available earlier in this week. If I had a higher pay grade, I could clear my diary for you, but I am a lowly barrister, and therefore I get no choice about what I do.
Oh dear, dear, dear.
But
I hope that you talk to people on the train.
well, um, yesterday Monday was a nightmare on the train, just with delays. Today was completely fine, and hopefully tomorrow will be fine. And like oddly enough, one of the strange things about being a barrister is that it doesn't matter what the case is about in a way. I know that sounds slightly unattractive, but you get cases where you deal with all sorts of subjects you could imagine, in the same way that I'm sure you dealt with all sorts of subjects when you were dealing with things as a journalist, some of which are very grim, some of which might still live with you in terms of your recollection of there on the ground. And I don't have to deal with things there on the ground, but I have to deal with things post. But the three most important things for me, in order, are if you're defending, that you've got a sensible client. Because if you don't have a sensible client, and Keith, this is why I've told you time and again, I'm not going to represent you. If you've got a sensible client and they take sensible advice, it's always their case, their decisions, you can only advise them. Then that makes life easier. The second thing you want is you want a sensible judge, and I've got one of those over in where I'm doing this case out of county. A really nice judge who's very measured, has allowed us to get on with it. Pleasure to be in front of, allowed me to make some really appalling jokes, if I may say. But there we go. But the single most important thing that you can have when you're doing a case is that you have a reasonable opponent. So another member of the bar whom you can trust, who will do their job properly, and who won't seek to snitch on you or put the boot in or say, Mr. Barton said in the roving room the following things. When, you can imagine, Keith, that roving room conversations, that is where the barristers stick their finery on. They're completely out of bounds unless you specifically agree that they should be revealed. Um, so it's a sort of it's a closed box where you can talk candidly, and a lot of good comes out of that, because in fact the case I'm doing at the moment, um, sorry, I'm going to witter on for a bit. Is that okay, Keith?
Yes, it's okay, but just let me say that the big difference between you and I is that it is as you described for you, but for me, I mean, particularly when I was broadcasting in the States, I had 8 million people watching me each day, and I was not aware of any of them, and you couldn't gossip because everybody would hear the gossip.
No, no, I quite understand that. I'm not sure I've ever had 8 million jurors in one case.
Did rather
uh,
a lot.
it would be a lot into any courtroom. um, I've lost my thread now, but it doesn't matter.
Sorry about
So
that.
no, 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 don't worry. So the most important thing is having a decent opponent, and I do have a young chap um, who is very much significantly younger than me, for whom the case is quite serious. It's a big case for him.
Ah, I see. Yes. No, I
Yeah.
thought you were talking about our partner in crime.
No, 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 no. So this young fella um, is dealing with a case that's within his. is all been very much changed. It sounds like it's changed, but there's no harm. But it matters. The odd thing is, here's a strange thing, is that if you prosecute and we galloped it because the judge was nice.
Can you lean closer to your microphone? We're losing your voice.
No.
That's it. That's better. Yeah.
Because the judge was nice and because the opponent was nice and the judge gave us time, we finished all the evidence today, and this was meant to be a 5-day case. So, in fact, giving us time to sort things out shortened the case enormously. There's a lesson there, not one that's always learned by the judges. But the other interesting issue that does arise out of this, or maybe not that interesting, is that I'm sure your viewer and his dog will be aware that many cases have a victim, and it's a very obvious victim. And if you're prosecuting, you need to manage their expectations, you need to deal with them, you need to make sure that they give their evidence in a way that they're content with. You need, if there's a conviction, that there's what's called a victim personal statement, which is a further statement setting out how the case is impacted upon them. Some cases you don't have a victim, and there are various reasons for that. Some of them, tragically, and I've dealt with many of them, is because the victim is dead, caused by a whole range of reasons: murder, manslaughter, death by dangerous driving, etc. And then you need to manage the expectations of the family, which sometimes can be a trickier process. And in particular, where there is the potential for some suggestion from the defence that it might be the deceased who was at fault, or at least partially at fault. And you will appreciate that can raise the hackles. And courtrooms aren't that large. And in those cases, families often come along both sides mob-handed. And you do need to deal with that. Some cases have no victim because they're, quotes, victimless crimes. So, for example, tax fraud, which I don't prosecute simply because life is too short to deal with something as dull as that. So, where there's a sort of nebulous concept of the state being the victim. But oddly enough, you do get some cases, and the reason I say this, because I was thinking about it this week, is where the, quote, victim, the complainant, has simply not cooperated with the process, doesn't want the person to be prosecuted, hasn't made a statement, refuses to come to court, refuses to talk to the police in any way whatsoever because they hate the police. Those are really tricky cases because firstly you have to decide whether or not, and there are powers. You can witness summon somebody, which is an officer goes around, knocks on their door and says, hello sir, you've got to be at court on Monday. And if they don't turn up, hello sir, Monday evening we've got a warrant for your arrest and you're now coming with us until you do give your evidence. You can imagine the problem with that, Keith, is that very often they get in the box and say nothing. So it's a difficult balance deciding whether or not you go down that route in any given case. I did a case in Lewes. I may have mentioned it previously, where um, a teacher ran away with his 15-year-old pupil, ran away to France because they were apparently in love. It had a lot of publicity. I've never had publicity like it in a case, and I've done far more serious cases than that. And we weren't sure whether she was going to turn up. I was prosecuting it. And the officer, it was a very, very senior officer, top end officer, went off because, in fact, she was doing an exam at school in the morning. Went off and he had the witness summons, which is the thing saying you need to attend. But he also had, and this is very occasionally is permitted, he also had a warrant. So that if she didn't comply with the summons, and it's deeply regrettable that you have to come to this, but there's a protection of other people. He had, if he needed to, this very, very senior officer, using his discretion, had the ability, had he needed to use it, he didn't, to arrest her and bring her to court. It's an interesting process, the whole reluctant witness thing. People have a whole range of reasons why they don't want to get involved. One of them is the delays. One of them is I still love him. One of them is I don't want to give up a day's work. And there's a whole host of others, as you can well imagine. And then people disappear sometimes and that sort of thing. But I have to say, this week I've been wrestling with all those problems. Sorry, that's a long ramble, but
you painted the picture very well.
It's not quite as it appears on all those crime programs that you've mentioned to me before, Keith, where people just turn up to court and the prosecution calls them and whatever. 9 times out of 10 it is like that. And if you're prosecuting, they're given their statement, you go and have a chat with them, you can't talk to them about the evidence, but you just reassure them that this isn't America. So no one's going to shout at them, no one's going to bully them. If they start trying to do that, I, as the prosecutor and the judge, will stop that happening. And if you can't remember something, don't worry, because we can shove your statement under your nose even though you can't have it to begin with. And I do tend to say to witnesses, prosecution witnesses, look, you're going to go away from here with 2 thoughts. You're going to, first of all, think that was a bit dull, and it wasn't half as combative as I thought it was going to be. But secondly, and more importantly in a way, and I can understand, I've never given evidence, but I can understand this, that they build themselves up because they're going to give evidence in a criminal court. And there's that adrenaline flow then. And then when they come out, case hasn't concluded, but when they come out, all that adrenaline drains away and they will feel very down. And they just need to be assured that, in fact, that's not because they've screwed up giving their evidence. Sometimes it is they've screwed up giving their evidence, but generally it's not, I promise you. And if they have screwed up, it's probably my fault if I'm prosecuting and I haven't led them properly. But people ought to know that, that there's that nervous tension of talking in public. I feel it every time I talk to you, Keith. That one man and his dog watching us frighten me to hell. Uh, but you do need to tell them that is perfectly natural, that you will feel that. Don't worry. If you want to have a weep, that's fine. Sometimes people have supporters there, witnesses have, and I always advise, look, one of you, whoever it is, don't come into court. Stay outside. Be there for them when they come out. So don't dissect the way their evidence happened or didn't happen. Just be there as a comfort. Um, God, I sound like a bloody social worker. Sorry, I'm going to stop talking.
Yeah, can I just give you one assurance? I just got the latest figures in. It's still
Yeah,
one that you've got 700 dogs watching.
that's good. Well, if you've got 701 because Jed's here in the corner.
Right.
And I'd let our other dog out, but he is always confined to the kitchen because we don't trust him with the furniture. I have to say, the soft furnishings, he will chew them.
Oh dear.
Keith, I hope you don't mind, but I've rambled on a bit now. I hope we've still got time, haven't we?
Yes. You haven't rambled for that long, actually.
Oh God, if only you knew. Um, I just thought it would be, and I know you, or I'm told from B2 Philip that you have discussed this previously. The present conundrum that the BBC have about a presenter, and obviously we're not going to mention any names or anything of that kind. That goes without saying. But you're a journalist. I'm a lawyer. It sounds as if that's almost exactly at the crossroads of where our two professions combine. And I've got some views on things, and I might express those now if you don't mind. And then I'd be very interested to hear your views, despite the very bright hat that you're wearing, if I may say.
It's,
Um,
it's a new addition.
yeah. And there are charity shops in Lewes who would take it, I'm sure.
Take it back, you mean?
Yeah, take it back, quite. Yeah. Uh, um, it's an odd little anomaly from the legal point of view that the age of consent for what are referred to as contact offences, in other words, having some kind of sexual contact with somebody else, the age of consent is 16. But the images legislation predates that, and the age there is 18. So that if somebody is 17 and somebody incites them, that is, encourages them, tells them, gives them money, whatever, to send what used to be called indecent images, in other words, sexual images of themselves, when they're 17, that is an offence. But this case has a number of difficulties, as I'm sure you will appreciate, because it's slightly fast moving. It's the lad's mother who has made the complaint. It seems to me that regardless of where the truth lies, that was dealt in quite a tardy fashion by the BBC, and they need to be rebuked for that. And I know that other people in his family have expressed a different view. And I know that through lawyers, he has expressed a different view, and there's an interesting little question there, which is how has he afforded getting his own lawyers involved? Because, as I'm sure Keith, you will appreciate, that if somebody, don't know who, but if somebody persuades a potential witness to a criminal offence, which on the face of it, from what the mother has said, is a criminal offence, persuades the witness to retract and not give evidence, then that can constitute witness interference, which is a statutory offence, or it can, or it constitutes the offence of attempt to pervert the course of justice, which is in fact a common law offence. They're both very serious, and the starting point for both of those is custody, depending on the circumstances, how long that custody is. But it's rare for people who are convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice don't go to prison. So that ongoing dynamic within the case, or within the matter, is interesting, because whoever this person might be, who may or may not have paid for images, who knows, but then who may or may not have paid for a lawyer. Heaven's sake, who would pay for a lawyer when they could have me? I'll do it for free. No, but you know, there's just that odd thing where you think this is a a relatively young lad. He's got a top-notch lawyer there. How's that funded? And I've no doubt the Met Police will be squirreling around, looking into that to see how that has occurred. So from a legal perspective, it's quite interesting. It has that initial offence, paying for images. It would only be an offence until he's 18. And oddly enough, it harks back to what I was saying earlier about having a complainant who doesn't cooperate, on whether or not you can then mount a case against somebody. There does seem to be here some elements, I may be wrong, of images and phone contact. And again, the police will be looking at that and looking very closely into all of that, about contact and what that, and so seizing phones, analysing that may take time, and then in due course challenging the person involved as to why they were frankly in contact with this person in the first place. So from a lawyer's perspective, that's quite interesting. But that secondary thing that's come out in the last couple of days about where it said that the lad, sorry, I say lad, he's a young man, has said through his solicitors that nothing bad happened. There may be further implications there. If there's been, for example, if in the last week there's been contact and there's provable contact between them, then that may well be the basis of further charges. So there's pressure brought to bear on a young, potentially vulnerable person being told, don't say anything. And I'm afraid to say, it happens to lots of people. This one happens to be male. A lot of them are female who find themselves in that position. But who can say? But Keith, I'd be interested to know what your views are from a, dare I say it, a filthy old journalist's point of view.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think in my discussions with Philip, I said that I always have a deep sense of unease about some of these cases because I'm not at all sure that we're not judging on the mores of today what was done yesterday and under a different set of laws, a different set of morality, a different view of things. I mean, the BBC that I worked for in the 1970s is quite different to the BBC today. And is I think that just based on what I know about this case, and I've deliberately not tried to dig. I mean, I've not even tried to guess who it is, which has become the national game, of course. Are we looking at things from a modern point of view with things that would have been perfectly acceptable in the 1970s? And actually, I mean, I go back because I'm long enough in the truth is to the early 1960s. And if it was, if a lot of the sex cases today were judged in those terms, is everybody would have been in jail. It was a different set of mores.
I agree with you entirely in terms of the ethos there. This is, of course, by the sounds of it, something that's happened in the last 4 years. So I don't think any of that engages. And I do lots of cases about historic.
Yeah. But I'm just interested to see how you actually handle the difference in public attitudes. I mean, for instance, the other thing is that this is happening at the BBC. I'm not condoning it. Don't misunderstand. I'm just saying that it happens, and you look at it from the fact point of view. And yet, it would appear that young footballers are doing this sort of thing all the time, and everybody sort of wipes their hands because football is a sacred cow.
That's an interesting topic in itself, as you know. At some point, Keith, we could have a separate talk about why footballers never get convicted, which is the truth of it. And I know the difficulties in terms of the ethos, the mores, as you say, between the late 60s, 70s. You know, I've done cases back. I've certainly done cases where the sexual allegations predate me being born, for heaven's sake. You know, I'm an old fella. But, and I hope I don't alarm you with this, Keith, and I hope that you don't go home thinking that I'm going to come and arrest you. I promise you I won't. For slapping somebody on the bottom in 1967. But the truth is, the law's the law, and just because people got away with it, in the same, let me give you a completely different example. Drink driving. I remember growing up, and adults, may I just say this for clarity, I have never driven, and very occasionally, modestly, I drink, and I've left my bloody glass of red downstairs. So there we
go. Yes, that's very sad, if I may say so.
I know, seriously, my throat's getting very dry. But it doesn't make it right that people did it. And I've had I'm sure I've told you this before, Keith, but I've had cases where there are people my age, 57, no, sorry, 56. I'll confess up to it, where they have, as men, as adult men, have come into the witness box and said, when I was at prep school, that man there in the dock sexually abused me, and I have never felt able to have a proper relationship sexually with anybody, and I've had a terrible sense of guilt as a consequence of it all, and I didn't feel able to tell anybody for many years, and it's a relief to do it. And then they cry. Now, I'm not saying it's like the BBC case. I don't know about the BBC case, but it's important that people like those who were victims, were found to be victims. The defendant in that particular case went to prison for life, full life. No chance of coming back out. Are able to have their say, because just it's not so. Dare I say it, Keith? You sound like my father. That was back in the day. Yeah, some things were acceptable, which wouldn't be acceptable now. There are words that we don't use anymore. There are comments that would no longer be acceptable. But physical sexual contact was never acceptable without consent. Sorry, I'm not.
Actually, strange enough, I don't know why, I was ruminating about something else today, and I was recalling the News of the World, which used to have its sexual stories, and it would say, and they went upstairs, and he was intimate with her.
Yes. No. The only good thing, Keith, there aren't many good things about. Well, no, there are several good things about being a criminal barrister. You get to dress up, get to put a wig and a gown on. That's quite nice. You get to talk to people who have to listen to you, which is a change from, for example, my family, who don't listen to a word I say. But the other thing is that a great advantage is that where explicit language is used and recorded in the witness statements, you can effectively put your quotes around it and use it as much as you like. And I know that there was one judge who's now retired, very nice, very posh fella, in fact, and he would just relish using the F word if he could. And if a case involved the F word, somebody using the F word, he would repeat it about 8 to 12 times in his summing up. Because I would imagine if he went home to Mrs. Judge, he wasn't allowed to say, so he was venting his spleen in court. And it is a joy. It is a joy. I have stories about that, but I can't possibly tell you on air, Keith. I'm sorry.
All right. Tell me this: what would have your reaction have been as a parent? In Northern Ireland, of course, it's only quite recently, relatively recently, that being gay was not against the law. And my daughter was a fashion model, and when she was 17 or 18. She would come home the next day after a very big show that was perhaps away from home. And she'd say, "It's all right, Mum. I slept with Brian," meaning her boss, who was gay. In other words, she's saying, "Perfectly okay. I wasn't naughty, and so on." But I mean, what she's doing is admitting that she slept with somebody who was patently breaking the law.
Well, not if it's just sleeping in the same bed. That's not breaking the law, is it?
I don't know, is it?
No, no, it's definitely not. It might be unwise because the youngster might end up making allegations, but no, it's not. No,
Yeah,
no.
yeah,
And well, good on her that she felt sufficiently liberated, no doubt by
yeah.
your and your wife's assistance, that she was able to, you know, take that on board, as it were. That
Yes. So,
it, these
I
things.
mean, not to go down too many different paths, but they had a very, very strong relationship, my wife and my daughter, and they would talk about almost anything quite openly with one another. But I always thought that it was faintly amusing that her reason for saying it's all right, Mum, I wasn't a naughty girl, was sleeping with a man.
Yeah, yeah. There's. Oh gosh, don't get me started on that, Keith. Please don't get me started on that. Um, just coming back to, if I may, um, this BBC case, which is, I know, something that everybody's interested in, um, and working through. How do you see it resolving itself, Keith?
Um, well, once again, I think perhaps I'm dealing in red herrings for you, but um, having worked for the BBC, I understand how its bureaucracy works, and I don't differentiate between its bureaucracy and that of the NHS and other
Sure.
quasi-government organisations. The people at the coalface, the doctors and the nurses, and for that matter, the broadcasters and the journalists and so on, are quite different to the people who supposedly are running it and who really are the BBC or the NHS or whatever. And I'm never absolutely sure how they think at any given time. For instance, I remember in Northern Ireland being in quite a serious conversation with a chap who was over from London, who argued that the BBC was important to itself and therefore quite beyond any sort of criticism. And he meant it. um,
Oh dear.
now, the other thing is that I'm not going to mention names, but in my day, a very well known, even well known today, presenter was having an affair with a producer, a senior producer in the same department. And the manual at the BBC quite clearly stated that you could not be in the same department.
Yeah.
The manuals were recalled and the offending pages taken out and the manual redistributed within 24 hours because of the power of the people involved.
In fact, very oddly enough, Keith, this evening, um, I'm not quite home alone. My youngest daughter is here, and I cooked her dinner before I spoke to you. The balance of my family are just squandering my inheritance in Glyndebourne, and I won't begin to tell you how much that costs by way of frocks and picnics and bloody everything else. But I would pay you good money not to have to go there myself, as you know, because I'm a good old socialist. But I was talking to her about somebody that she knows well, who is an actor, a very well-known actor, who I know got a super injunction. Now, a super injunction is something that says you can't report what I've done, and you can't even report the fact that I've got this super injunction. It's one of those things that Ryan Giggs, for example, got originally, and then it came tumbling out. But this actor kept his, and it remains in place. and it involves some deeply unattractive conduct on his part. Not criminal, but deeply unattractive. Um, and so, it may well be that whoever this presenter is could get themselves a super injunction and get away with it. The other side of it, of course, which is an interesting little tantalizing side of it, albeit the minister today said that they wouldn't do it, is you've got what's called parliamentary privilege, and you'll know what that is, Keith.
Uh-huh.
It means that in Parliament, you are not subject to the rules of defamation. And as I've told you before, the rule, defamation is lowering somebody in the minds of right-thinking people, either in writing, libel, or in words, slander. That's why libel and slander are just two parts of the same thing. It's like zebras and horses. But Parliament retains its privilege, that is the right to, if they wish to, name and shame. And I think you'll confirm this, Keith, that once Parliament has said something, the journalists like you have a right to report what's said in Parliament.
Right. So it goes into Hansard.
Well, it goes into Hansard and then it's in the public domain.
Yes.
So I don't know who it is. I don't want to know who it is, frankly. But all it takes is for one member of Parliament to stand up and say, I name whatever, however they wish to crowbar it into a question, and then it's there in the public domain, and there's simply nothing that any of us, when it comes out, Keith, about your multi-million-pound drugs empire, and somebody in Parliament says that about you, I won't be able to defend you, mate. I'm sorry. That would just be.
I was relying upon that.
I know you were. But you've got your island in the middle of the Pacific, with your den there, and
your advice is for me to bugger off there.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, you've got the long-haired white cat that you stroke, and at the moment there's no James Bond, so I think you're fine. I do think you're fine, but it's a very interesting developing story, this one, isn't it?
It is. One of the things that before we leave it is that a number of other presenters named have rushed to say it's not me, Gov. And one thing that is really good journalists, and I actually worked. I have to be careful what I say because I didn't work directly, but for Dow Jones, and they had something called an enterprise story. And an enterprise story is where you took a tiny little scrap of information that didn't smell right to you, and you built on it, and you built on it, and you built on it until you got a proper story. And I would have thought that these people who are saying it's not me are flagging to a good investigative journalist. Hang on, if he thinks that people think it's him doing this, then what is he guilty of? And I'd be sniffing around.
No, I can quite understand that. Also, the other difficulty is that if you've got 20 high-profile journalists who might be in the frame, and 19 of them say it's not me, then you have an answer as to who it is. But you're quite right. It shows a lack of solidarity between them.
Listen, when you get above the average pay grade, in media, not just the BBC, in any media, is, believe me, are amongst the sharks.
I will never be above the average pay grade, so that's fine. I will be filling the shelves at the Leicester Road stores for years to come. But I will, I will be, and I encourage all of your viewers to go to the Leicester Road stores. Raj and Dolly are wonderful there. And if they don't have in what you want in, they'll have it in tomorrow. I promise you that. So there's a little bit of advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not very far away.
No. For example, I said, look, I quite like cockles. I know that's an odd thing. And he just gets jars of cockles in for me. So every day I have a jar of cockles.
Now that is service.
That's proper service, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a wonderful way to end off our conversation. We have, in fact, been talking for 46 minutes and 10 seconds, would you believe?
Oh, good grief. Time goes so quickly when we're having fun.
Absolutely. But, once again, Richard, what you bring to our viewing public, I was going to say to the table, but to our viewing public is a lot of information. We all make a basic mistake, I think, in all our professions of thinking that everybody knows all about it, and therefore, we don't have to do much explanation. We just use what we use within the profession, and in fact, I hate to use the word ignorance, but for the sake of argument, let's use the word ignorance. The ignorance of what you do and what I do, and so on and so forth, is widespread. And to bring in a little bit of insight into stuff that we think is perhaps ordinary common stuff is very important, and you do it extremely well.
You're very kind. I wouldn't use the word ignorance. I just think it's that, different people have different lives. If my dear old father was still alive, I'd have him on here and he'd tell you how to deal with a dodgy carburettor on an Austin 7. A sort of pre-war car. So people have different skills, and I'm sure your viewer and his dog have skills of their own. I don't know how to go outside and whittle in the street without being arrested, but probably that dog does.
Yeah, indeed it does sometimes. Yes, I must say that my own view of your profession has always been I want to be Judge John Deed and bonk my way through the cases in front of me.
There are things I could say about that, but again, there are not things that I can say for a whole range of reasons, not least that Mrs. B might one day hear them on that subject. Next time we see each other over a glass, I'll fill you in.
Very well.
Keith, it's lovely to see you. Thank you for accommodating me this evening.
Thank you for taking the time, because you had a very heavy day, and I do appreciate you taking the time and the effort to go into your upper chamber, having cooked your daughter a meal, waved your wife goodbye as she disappeared to Glyndebourne, and then bothered to come and give very good explanation to the 700 dogs and the man.
And I think I can quite justifiably say that the goldfish bowl of red that I'm going downstairs to pour myself will not touch the sides. Keith, lovely to speak to you. I'm hoping that either Thursday or Friday I'll be available. I'll keep you posted, I promise you.
Yeah, that's great.
And Philip will be available, and we've got a topic to talk about.
Yes. And the one thing that I like is when you are available is that normally you like early in the morning and really get us off to a great start to the day.
I'm like the shipping forecast. People might say I'm the shitting forecast, but anyway, that's a rude word, and I'm not going to use it again.
No, don't.
I won't. Keith, lovely to see you, mate.
See you later in the week.
See you later in the week. You take care.
Take care.